You might think you know what it means to disappear. You don't. Not like this. I remember it clearly. We had just set up camp, and DR was so excited. He ran ahead on the trail, laughing, pointing at the trees. I told him to stay close, but he didn't listen. He ran faster, and then he just disappeared. At first, I thought he had just gone a little further, maybe hiding or exploring. But when I called his name, the echo came back, and that was it. No answer, not a sound. I ran after him, calling again, my heart pounding. The footprints started to appear, tiny and clear, but then just a few meters in, they vanished. The dirt looked untouched, as if he had never been there. We checked our phones. No signal. GPS was dead. I even looked at my camera-blurred shadows, moving light, but nothing concrete. It felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. The forest was silent, too silent, and I knew, somewhere deep down, that something had taken him. I will never forget that moment. It's burned into my mind. I ran back to the campsite, shouting for him. My wife was pale, clutching our younger child, eyes wide. The others were already gathering, scanning the tree line. We split into small groups, calling, whistling, trying to follow the faint trail. Every sound seemed amplified. Every rustle of leaves made my stomach tighten. But the forest gave nothing back, no response, no clue. Hours passed. The sun sank behind the peaks. Our searchlight beams cut through the growing darkness, but shadows seemed to move just out of reach. Occasionally, I thought I saw him, just a flash of color, a fleeting movement, but every time I ran toward it, there was nothing. Just the same quiet, the same emptiness. At one point, I paused near a cluster of pines. The air felt thick. My ears picked up something, an almost imperceptible humming, steady, low. It wasn't natural. I froze. It stopped. And then, just as I exhaled, I heard it again, slightly higher pitch, coming from a different direction. I called for Dior. Silence. Night deepened. We huddled near the tents, flashlights sweeping the perimeter, but nothing moved. No footprints. No branches snapped in the way they had before. Even the wind seemed to have died. My mind kept replaying those last moments. His laughter, his tiny hands reaching forward, the trail that ended abruptly. Sleep was impossible. I sat awake, listening. Every crack of a twig sounded like it was right next to me. I thought I saw shadows stretching along the tree line, sometimes forming shapes that seemed human for a moment, before dissolving into darkness. My camera, which I kept pointed into the clearing, sometimes picked up faint lights or shapes, always blurry, always unexplainable. By dawn, search parties had expanded. Rangers arrived, dogs, volunteers. They combed the area methodically, calling out, sweeping with lights, checking GPS coordinates. I followed them, hoping for any sign. But even with their experience, nothing appeared. No tracks, no signals. It was like he had vanished into the ground. I walked the trail again, alone, trying to piece together what had happened. The footprints reappeared, briefly near a bend, almost as if the earth itself was changing under our feet. Branches snapped, a fleeting shadow, and then nothing. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that nature itself was not natural here. As the day wore on, the search shifted, the air heavy with fear and confusion. Helicopters hovered overhead, rangers called coordinates, and yet I felt the same oppressive silence from the forest. No bird calls, no wind, just the emptiness where he had been. I kept thinking, what could make a child simply vanish? How could the earth swallow him so completely? Everything pointed to ordinary risks, slopes, rivers, thick brush, but nothing explained the absence of any trace. Not a footprint, not a snapped twig, nothing. By evening, the reality began to settle in. Dior was gone. Not missing, not lost, gone. And as we packed up to regroup, I walked the trail once more. I could still hear faint whispers, like echoes of his laughter, or maybe my own fear. The forest seemed alive in ways I couldn't understand, almost watching. I don't know what happened to him. No one does. And every time I close my eyes, I see that trail ending abruptly, those footprints vanishing, and the forest swallowing him whole. I can't explain it. I may never understand it. But I know that, somewhere, he's out there, or maybe he's not. The forest keeps its secrets. And I will never forget the sound of silence where my son should have been. The next morning, the rangers arrived with dogs and more volunteers. Everyone moved with purpose, scanning the trees, calling his name, checking every trail. But even with their experience, the forest gave nothing. It was as if the trail itself had been erased. We followed the ridge, moving carefully. The ground was uneven. Branches snagged our clothes, but the usual forest sounds were missing. No birds, no wind. Just a faint hum in the background, low, steady, almost mechanical. It made my skin crawl. At one point, a volunteer pointed out what looked like footprints. I ran ahead, heart pounding, but when I got there, nothing. The dirt was smooth, clean. It was impossible. I checked my GPS. Dead again. Radio static. Even the dogs hesitated, sniffing the air, then retreating as if something unseen was watching. By afternoon, panic had settled in. Shadows seemed longer now, moving just at the edge of vision. Every snap of a twig made me jump. I kept thinking I saw him, Dior, small flashes of color, just for a second, then gone. My own eyes began to trick me, or maybe it was the forest. I couldn't tell anymore. As night fell again, we lit torches and flashlights. The forest changed under the dim light. Shapes twisted in the dark. Branches seemed to reach for us. I heard whispers too soft to understand, but they carried urgency, almost pleading. I called out for Dior, but my voice sounded wrong, distorted, as if bouncing off invisible walls. We set up a small perimeter, but sleep was impossible. Every rustle, every whisper made me wake, convinced something was moving through the trees. My camera kept catching flashes, blurred figures that weren't human, moving just beyond the light. At one point, I got separated from the group. I called for the others, but only the echo of my own voice returned. The forest felt alive, watching. By morning, the search had to regroup. Helicopters, drones, more volunteers. Nothing. No footprints, no traces, nothing that could explain what happened. Dior was just gone. Even now, thinking back, I can't understand it. How a child could vanish so completely, leaving no evidence, no trace. The forest holds him, or maybe something else does. And the hum, it never leaves my mind. I don't know if it's real, or if my fear created it, but every time I close my eyes, I hear it again. I will never forget that forest, the silence, the shadows that move just out of reach. And I will never stop wondering if he is still out there, or if he was never really there at all. Mount Shasta isn't like other trails. Something there. It doesn't follow the rules. We were breaking camp when Carl decided to hike a little further along the ridge. He said he just wanted to see a rock formation he'd noticed the day before. He waved at us and started down a narrow path. Minutes passed, and I realized he hadn't returned. I called his name. Only the wind answered, and even that felt muted. I ran after him, expecting to catch up quickly, but the trail seemed to shift. One moment I saw his jacket glinting in the sun, the next, nothing. We split up, trying to track him visually. Every turn looked the same. Rocks and trees seemed to rearrange themselves. Or maybe it was just the panic. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, small and quick, but when I turned, silence. As the day wore on, the ridge grew unnervingly still. Birds that had been calling fell quiet. Streams gurgled in odd rhythms, like echoes of laughter. We shouted, hoping he'd respond, but the only reply was the strange, hollow sound of the canyon. By late afternoon, we regrouped, exhausted and confused. Nothing indicated where he had gone. The path he took seemed erased. Every landmark I tried to remember looked different, as if the ridge had subtly shifted. Carl was gone. No trace, no footprints, nothing. By evening, the air grew colder. Shadows stretched oddly among the pines. Every movement in the corner of my eye made my stomach tighten. The forest felt aware. Carl had vanished into a place that obeyed its own rules, and we had no way of following. Night fell quickly, colder than we expected. The ridge that had seemed quiet during the day now felt alive, almost watching. We huddled together, trying to decide whether to continue searching or wait until morning. But something in the air pushed us forward. We couldn't just leave him there. The narrow path twisted unnaturally. Rocks jutted out where they hadn't before. Tree trunks appeared closer together, almost blocking the way. Every few steps, I thought I saw him a flicker of blue from his jacket, a shadow moving just beyond our flashlights. But when we reached that spot, there was nothing. The group started whispering to each other, tension rising. One of the friends said he heard faint humming coming from deeper in the canyon. I tried to listen, but it faded whenever I focused on it. Another thought he saw a figure standing among the trees, watching us, but when we all turned, the space was empty. Hours passed. We shouted his name, retraced the same small loops of the path, but the ridge seemed to stretch endlessly, repeating itself. Every landmark felt familiar and different at the same time, like the forest was playing tricks on us. I could feel the fear building inside everyone. Our movements became cautious, hesitant, almost mechanical. Then it happened. A low growl echoed from above, deep and resonant. One of the friends froze, pointing. A massive bear appeared at the edge of the clearing, eyes glinting in the flashlight beams. It stepped forward, sniffing the air, muscles tense. Panic erupted instantly. We shouted, waved sticks, trying to scare it off, but it didn't back down. It moved closer, claws scraping against the rocky ground. I grabbed Carl's backpack, anything to make noise or appear bigger. The friends scattered, yelling, throwing small rocks, but the bear wasn't deterred. We ran down the trail, branches whipping our faces, hearts pounding. The bear followed at a distance, growling, until the path narrowed and it hesitated. That pause gave us just enough space to break into a faster, desperate sprint toward a slope where the trees thinned. By then, it disappeared back into the darkness, leaving us gasping, bruised, terrified. Shaken, we regrouped. The bear incident had thrown us off balance, but there was no time to dwell. Carl was still missing. Every movement in the corner of our eyes made us jump. Every shadow felt alive. We realized then that the forest wasn't just hiding him. It was testing us, guiding us, reshaping itself as we moved. By midnight, the ridge felt endless, oppressive. Every snapped branch, every shifting shadow was amplified. We could barely distinguish hallucination from reality. At one point, I swore I saw Carl's silhouette standing between two rocks, looking back at me. I blinked. He was gone. By dawn, exhausted and terrified, we returned to the small clearing we had passed earlier. It was familiar, yet different. The rocks shifted slightly, and a small trail of disturbed earth ended abruptly. Carl had vanished into a place that seemed alive, hostile, and impossible to follow. Even now, thinking back, I can feel that ridge watching. Every shadow, every sound, every shift in the trees brings me back to that night. Carl is gone, and nothing, not us, not the forest, not even time will ever explain it. One wrong step can change everything. I remember the creek before everything went wrong. The water was faster than I had expected, furious, churning against jagged rocks and twisted roots. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of wet stone and snowmelt. Sidint was ahead of me, crouched near a small pool, pointing at a rock formation that jutted sharply out of the water. "Look at this," he said, voice trembling with excitement. "Perfect for a photo." I warned him carefully. "Be careful. Those rocks are slippery." He waved it off, grinning, already stepping across stones slick with water and moss. I followed, my own boots clanging softly against stone. The canyon around us was silent, except for the roar of the creek, shadows of the cliffs stretching unnaturally, almost reaching for us. At first, everything seemed manageable. I matched his pace, cautious with each step, but then I saw him slip. His foot hit a moss-covered boulder at a sharp angle, and he staggered, trying to regain balance. I lunged forward to grab him, but it was too late. He toppled forward and tumbled into the creek. The water swallowed him for a moment, carrying him downstream faster than I could react. I screamed. My voice echoed off the walls of the canyon, swallowed immediately by the roar of the rushing water. I jumped onto the stones, trying to grab his outstretched hand, but he was swept around a bend. I ran after him along the bank, slipping repeatedly, scraping my hands and knees on wet rocks. Each time I thought I had him in sight, he vanished behind another curve, another shadow. Panic surged inside me. I shouted his name again and again, each cry drowned by the torrent. I stumbled over loose stones, almost falling into the current myself. The canyon walls seemed to close in, narrowing with every step, creating the illusion that the space itself was shifting. I tried to focus, but my mind kept racing ahead, imagining him being dragged under, trapped between boulders, struggling against the icy water. Minutes stretched into hours, though it may have been only a few moments. The sun lowered, dying across the rocky banks, and suddenly the shadows became unfamiliar. Stones I had stepped on before looked different. Angles changed slightly. Moss patterns that had been familiar now appeared distorted. I paused, heart hammering, trying to understand if my mind was betraying me or if the canyon itself had changed. The water gurgled and roared, faster now, higher in some spots where the sun's warmth had melted snow upstream. Each time I spotted a glimpse of blue his jacket, my hope flared and then vanished when he disappeared again behind another bend. I slid down a narrow ledge, scraping my arms on rough stone, tasting the metallic tang of blood. My ankle twisted sharply, pain radiating up my leg, but I forced myself onward. I could not stop. Sidon's voice, or what I thought was his voice, echoed faintly over the water. A laugh, maybe, or a groan. It sounded distant, warped by the canyon. I turned toward the sound, moving cautiously along a narrow ledge above the creek. One wrong step, and I could have joined him in the icy water. My eyes scanned every shadow, every movement, trying to distinguish rock from human, branch from hand. Then I saw something impossible. A figure crouched at the edge of the water, just for a second motionless, staring back at me. I froze. Was it him? My mind screamed that it must be, but the next moment, he was gone. Only the creek roared, relentless, merciless. I called out, my voice breaking, trembling from cold and fear. No response. Only the echo of my own desperation returned. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but every inhale burned my lungs in the cold mountain air. I needed to find him before night fell completely. The temperature was dropping faster than I expected, and shadows now crept along the banks like living things, stretching unnaturally, mocking me. I pressed on, slipping and sliding over rocks, each step carefully calculated. Loose stones clattered underfoot, and I could hear them tumbling into the creek, small avalanches of rock and moss. My hands were raw from gripping slippery surfaces, my boots soaked through, but still, I moved. Every glance behind me was met only by the endless expanse of the canyon. No sign of him. The creek narrowed, winding into a gorge I had never noticed before. The walls of stone rose sharply, slick and dark. Each time the water curved, I felt my heart leap, thinking I might see him caught against a boulder, struggling. But every time, I reached only empty space, the water churning over stones, erasing all evidence that he had been there at all. I found myself on a ledge barely wider than my boots, clinging to the stone wall with one hand while balancing over the creek with the other. My muscles trembled from exertion, my chest heaving. Every breath was a struggle. The cold had seeped into my bones. The canyon seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, a labyrinth of stone and rushing water. A sudden shift of rocks startled me. A boulder loosened above, sliding slightly with a deep, grinding sound. I jumped back just in time. My hands were slick with water and blood, slipping as I tried to grip the rough stone. My heart raced. I realized the canyon wasn't just a backdrop. It was a threat, active and alive. I scrambled down, trying to find a path where the rocks were less treacherous. My boots skidded on slick moss. Once, I barely caught myself, dangling over the water for a heart-stopping moment. Each movement required precision, focus, and luck. My hands were shredded, my legs trembling from the strain, but I couldn't stop. Sidn't was still out there, somewhere, and I was running out of daylight. The canyon seemed to play tricks on me. Every shadow looked like a person, every ripple in the water like movement, every rock out of place. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, but the sound bounced back, distorted, warped. The water drowned it almost instantly. I felt isolated in a way I had never experienced alone in a living, breathing, shifting canyon. I climbed over a fallen log, careful not to lose balance. It groaned under my weight. My ankle twisted again, pain flaring sharply, but I forced myself up. I moved slowly, cautiously, scanning every inch of the bank. Every time I thought I spotted a glimpse of his jacket, it vanished. Rocks, shadows, water. It was impossible to tell reality from illusion. Night approached. The air grew colder, heavier. Fog began to rise from the creek, curling around rocks and trees, obscuring the path. The canyon swallowed sound. My calls returned only faint, distorted echoes. I slipped again, knees scraping stone, hands raw. Blood mixed with the icy water on my palms. I bit my lip to suppress a scream. By the time the sun fully disappeared behind the peaks, I was exhausted, shivering, every muscle trembling. I found a small outcropping to rest for a moment, but I couldn't stop thinking. The creek had taken him, or maybe something worse. The canyon seemed alive, shifting subtly, erasing footprints, reshaping paths, hiding him as if it didn't want him found. At one point, I reached a narrow overhang above the creek. I clung to the rock, peering down, straining to see. A shadow moved below, but it could have been a trick of the fog, the water, my exhausted mind. I shouted again. Silence. Only the sound of water, relentless, indifferent. I pressed onward. Every step was a gamble. Every sound falling water, a snapping branch, a rock sliding set my nerves on fire. I imagined Sidney struggling, trapped, being pulled into the icy current. I shouted his name again. My voice returned to me distorted, a cruel echo of my fear. The night fully fell. Darkness swallowed the creek, the rocks, and me. Only the roar of water remained, the sound filling my ears, drowning all other thought. I felt the canyon around me, massive and indifferent, almost aware. Every shadow stretched impossibly, every sound warped. And Sidn't, he was gone. Night had fully descended, swallowing the creek and the canyon in cold darkness. My flashlight was useless. Its beam barely penetrated the fog rising from the water. Every sound was amplified. The roar of the creek, the occasional crack of loose stone, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The creek curved sharply, twisting the path out of sight. I clung to a boulder, peering over the edge, but there was nothing, only rushing water, rocks slick with ice, and shadows that moved as if alive. The fog thickened, curling over the creek, and for a moment I thought I saw him kneeling on a rock. I shouted again. The figure vanished. I shouted Sidn's name. Only stillness returned. My voice seemed swallowed by the canyon itself. I ran along the slippery bank, slipping repeatedly, scraping my hands on rocks. My mind tried to reason. Maybe he had crawled to safety. Maybe he had found a ledge. But deep down I knew. I tried to retrace my steps, but the canyon seemed to change behind me. Rocks that had been stable shifted subtly. Paths I thought I remembered were gone. The water roared louder now, threatening to surge higher with the night's frost. Every instinct screamed at me. Leave, get out, but I couldn't. I had to find him. Then I reached the bend where I last saw him. The creek narrowed violently there, the water moving faster than any human could withstand. Rocks jutted at impossible angles. I strained my eyes, searching for a glimpse of blue, his jacket, his hand, anything, but there was nothing. The creek had erased him completely. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. My voice grew hoarse from shouting. My arms and legs scraped and bleeding. I called and called, but only echoes returned, cruel and distorted. Every shadow flickered, every sound twisted. It was as if the canyon itself was alive, mocking my desperation. I sank to my knees on a narrow ledge, shivering, exhausted, numb with cold and fear. There was no trail, no marker, no sign of him anywhere. I whispered his name one last time, but the canyon swallowed it, returning only the relentless roar of water. By the first hint of dawn, the creek and canyon were unchanged. Sidn't had vanished without a trace. The night had hidden him, the river had taken him, and the canyon had kept its secret. I sat on the rock, shivering, knowing one thing with unbearable clarity. Some mistakes, one slip, one misstep, they cannot be undone. The canyon remained silent, indifferent, and Sidn't. He was gone.